way. Episode number 328, we're going to look at why the FERS survivor annuity election is so important. Ask the question, how do I know if I'm ready to retire? Can I retire? And some of the things that Dan has learned from working with people that are retiring from federal service. We're going to be talking about the difference between a deferred versus a postponed annuity and how these things impact things like FEHB, which is health insurance for federal employees. And then Dan has really, he's an expert, he's a CPA, he's been called in to be a consultant for folks as they're going through divorce. And this is an area that he knows a lot about. And he said, Jason, 50% of people are going to end up getting divorced. He said, I think there's some things that they really need to know about. So we're going to cover divorce towards the end of this show. Anyways, I hope you find this helpful. One thing I want to tell you, as he talks about his personal preference for which spousal option you should take, and I'll let him explain to you why he chooses the option that he does. But I would just tell you to be cautious here. I always tell people, build a plan, stress test the plan, and see what happens to your spouse if you choose the reduced spousal survivor option. So head into this carefully. As always, remember, this is not specific advice for your specific situation. So you want to understand, how does this actually work for you before you implement anything? Okay, with that, let's get into the interview today. All right, everybody, welcome back to another round of Sound Retirement Radio. I'm so glad to be able to introduce my guest to you today. This is episode number 328. We're going to be talking about federal employees' retirement system, and I've got the good fortune to have Dan Jamison back on the program with me. Many of you know we've had him on in the years past. Dan retired from the FBI back in 2013. For the past 30 years, he's been a CPA, and he's helped thousands of federal employees go through the divorce process, and specifically how divorce relates to their federal benefits. So we're going to get into that. But Dan, welcome to Sound Retirement Radio.
Thank you, Jason. It's really good to be back.
Man, it's good to have you back. So we're going to talk about divorce. I know that's an area you've spent a lot of time and energy and help people avoid some pitfalls. But before we do, I just have some general federal employee benefits questions, things that have come up recently that I thought I'd get some clarification from you, because you're kind of one of my go-to FERS experts, the Federal Employees Retirement Systems experts. Before we get too far into the questions, though, Dan, I do want to let people know your book is, you've got a book on Amazon that's updated every year, both for regular federal employees retirement system as well as special category, law enforcement and whatnot. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But my questions for you are, the first one is just big picture, general question. How can somebody know if they're not eligible to retire from the federal government, but if they're ready, like financially ready to retire? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think that the eligibility portion, that's pretty objective. If you're old enough and you've been in long enough, right, you can retire. But your question is, that being satisfied, can you actually do it and survive on that adjusted level of income? But before I address the level of income, the other component that I run into, having done this for a couple of decades, is getting yourself prepared to retire mentally. It's very different when you're going to work for 30 years, and if you're not a special category employee, and you may be at the same job or same agency for 30 years. So that's an awful lot of time, and you've got your job nailed down. You know exactly what to do every day. It is just wired. It is not that difficult to do, but you've also let the job kind of become your identity. And it's what you do every day, and maybe you don't have a skill set that transitions out of the federal workforce into the private sector, where you're not ready to just hang up your spurs completely. So the number one thing is, I think you've got to get mentally there. I'm not going to let this job as an IRS agent, be my identity. I'm going to get out and go do something else. And I firmly believe you have to have a plan to do something else. I think if you retire and go home and sit on your tail, you'll be dead in 5 years. And I see that. You've got to have something to do, something of purpose. You've got to exercise your brain. You've got to exercise your body. Even if you're working part-time at Home Depot helping somebody find something on the shelf, I think that's better than sitting at home. So I'm going to get that off my chest first, because I run into that a lot.
So just out of curiosity, because I run into that a lot too, and it's actually a big concern that a lot of couples have, especially I'll hear the wives say, I'm really worried about my husband retiring. I think he's going to drive me crazy being at home all day. Any resources that you can point people to help them get clarity about this transition, retiring not from something, but retiring to something is the way I've heard it described?
I would suggest maybe talking to some of the folks in your office that have already made the retirement jump, but not just made it. Maybe they retired 5 or 10 years ago and you knew them when they were there, and ask them how that adjustment period went for them. I mean, I can tell you personally, my wife was used to me being gone Monday through Friday, 10 hours a day. I'm here in your, 24/7, 365. And the wife says, I'm going to go run to Walmart to pick up some groceries. I'm trying to figure out, is that an invitation from the commerce? She's telling me she's going to go head over to Walmart and I'm going to stay here. So it does take a few months to work that routine out, but and I talk to a lot of newly retired federal employees, Jason, and they tell me that there is this, transitional period, 3, 6, 9 months, where it's just, you're going to work out, you're going to eat out today, eat in today. I mean, there's a lot of it. I can tell from personal experience, having, again, retired 7 years ago with my wife here at the house. Most days she works 3 days a week. The other 2 days, we make it work, and it works out really, really well. But you definitely don't want to let the job become your identity. I wish I had a resource to do, but I think talking to people who have been through the process, I think the best medicine for that.
Okay. All right. Great. So now, as you think about being financially ready, what would you say people really need to do to be financially ready to retire, other than obviously being eligible?
Hopefully some of the people listening to this are earlier on in their career, because the number one takeaway, and I probably said it on an earlier show, is contribute to the thrift savings plan until it hurts, and then contribute a little bit more. Having a well-funded thrift savings plan account, I think, is the number one key to a more stress-free and solid retirement where you're not worried about running out of money. That is the number one thing that I would point out is we get paid 26 times a year, Jason. So every pay period is an open season, if you will, opportunity to change that amount. And in most agencies, you can make that change every pay period. And let's say you're contributing $300 a pay period. Well, make it $310. Next pay period, make it $315. Next pay period, make it $320. Just have a plan to get there. I routinely see balances in excess of $1 million in the thrift plan for a 25-year employee or 30-year employee, routinely, because in my divorce practice, I see the thrift savings plan account because it's going to get divided. So it's not a pie in the sky number. And I'm always intrigued by the folks that have $1 million and maybe 25 years of service. And I ask them, and this is not investment advice, I know you're an investor, but I ask them, how did you do it? And they tell me the same thing. I didn't, or I ask them, how many interfund transfers did you make? The usual answer, Jason, is 0. They would tell me that they placed it in one fund, whether usually the C fund or the S fund or a combination of those two, and left it alone for 25 years, and now they're millionaires. So it does happen, and it can happen. But in terms of the monthly obligation to fund your life, you have to look at what you're bringing home in retirement on an after-tax basis and compare that to what you're making on the job on an after-tax basis. So what I tell people is you make less in retirement, but you get to keep more of it. So when you're working for your agency, you've got Medicare taxes and Social Security taxes coming out of your paycheck, and that's not going to come out of your annuity. Your annuity payment is not active employment or earned income. It's 1099. So you don't have the Medicare tax. You don't have Social Security. You may have been paying into a short-term disability fund. Short-term disability generally ends when you retire, so that's not coming out anymore. You're paying, if you're in FERS, you could be paying anywhere from 0.8% all the way up to 4.9% if you're a law enforcement officer towards FERS. Well, that goes away, right? You may be contributing $750 a pay period if you're maxing out or close to that. That would be this year's max. The thrift plan. Well, if you retire, Jason, that's $750 that you're used to seeing. It's not coming out anymore. So you might have been making $100,000 a year, or maybe making $4,000 a pay period, but you surely weren't living on $4,000 a pay period. That's what I tell people. You